I am stunned by the lack of knowledge that British journalists have about our system in America. They don't understand how it works. They don't know. The British people are buying. I mean, you got the BBC lined up to do exactly what the NBC News is doing here. The BBC does over there, right?
Yeah, but I would say that the difference now compared.
In this one, Piers Morgan joins Bill O'Reilly on Bill O'Reilly's show to discuss how they're looking at Donald Trump from across the pond. As some of you may know, Piers Morgan does not live inside the United States. He lives over in Europe somewhere. And because of that, he's able to give a European perspective on what's going on with Donald Trump. And it's Piers Morgan's opinion that Donald Trump is doing a good job. And because the left is doing so horribly in the UK, the people in the UK are also favoring Trump. So let's have a look at Piers Morgan and Bill O'Reilly discussing Europe's opinion on Donald Trump.
What about overseas? How do they see Donald Trump, particularly our strongest ally, Great Britain? So joining us now from London, England, where I lived for a year until they deported me for being obnoxious, is Piers Morgan. You know him. I don't have to go through the resume, but you can check him out on YouTube. His program is called Piers Morgan Uncensored. I don't know if you have ever been censored from the time you were 2, but to reinforce that is good. So, number one, you would agree with me that Donald Trump's taking revenge on the American media, correct?
Yeah, no question. But I also think that it's been entirely predictable given the way that the mainstream media in America has behaved in such an overtly partisan manner against him for 8 years. And I've been criticizing them for 8 years for doing it, pointing out that it's not the job of the media to take sides. I mean, some of them may be unashamedly, partisan. Fine, then show your colors. It's the more insidious, secret partisan behavior of very liberal-dominated newsrooms working at these supposedly impartial networks who've waged a kind of systematic activist campaign against Trump. And obviously, now he's got the chance, he's going to have some fun with them. But I would tell them to look at themselves very hard in the mirror and say, have we really not brought this on ourselves?
Well, they're not going to do that. Why would they do that? I mean, it's the culture is and always has been in the national news arena left. Guy worked for CBS News. I work for ABC News. I mean, I know what the deal is. Now, it's crazy since Trump got into politics. Then all of the barriers left. And it was justified by a New York Times columnist who said, look, this guy's a danger to the union, so we're not going to have any rules anymore. We're going to try to destroy him. And once the New York Times put that posture out, then they all followed, and they thought that they had him. They thought that Donald Trump was done, and he rose like Dracula, and now he's going after them. Do you feel that is beneath the President of the United States to wreak that kind of vengeance?
Well, I think Donald Trump is always going to do what Donald Trump wants to do. And people who've tried to get involved in changing his mind about exacting retribution in this kind of manner normally discover it's a bit pointless. He's nearly 80 years old. He's a leopard who won't change his spots when it comes to that kind of thing. If you read his book, The Art of the Deal, then it's all in there. Somebody punches you, punch them 10 times harder back is his mantra, and always has been for 50 years. So he's not going to change now. I do think it's probably a little bit of a waste of time for the President of the United States when he's got so many more important things to worry about than going after the media. But what he's really doing, Bill, I think, is he's putting them back in their box. And he's also, I think, trying to focus their minds on, why don't you just try in this term of office, unlike the first term, being a little bit more fair-minded, having some more conservative voices on your network, actually not making them pariahs, not directing your audience to feel that everything that Donald Trump does is evil personified. And actually, a lot of it might be quite good, which is why he's just won such a thumping win in the election. So I think he's very deliberately saying, right, you've had it your own way with me for 8 years. This time, we're going to level the playing field.
And when it comes to leveling the playing field, Donald Trump should be cutting off every single news network that has attacked him over the last 8 years. The time for reaching across the aisle from MAGA's perspective has long passed, in my opinion. Just look at every single time Donald Trump tried in his first term to reach across the aisle and say, hey, look, left, I'm not this bad guy that you want me to be. I'll spend $50 million on Russian collusion investigating myself. I'll put Robert Mueller in charge, a guy that ultimately hates Donald Trump. And Donald Trump was vindicated. The Russian collusion was a hoax, just like we thought it was from the very beginning. Not only was it fake news, but we've learned that the FBI knew from the beginning as well, and they still went on and wasted that $50 million trying to make Trump look bad, digging into every little corner that they could and every person that surrounded Donald Trump. They basically came with a telescope and shoved it right at the ass of every single person that surrounded Donald Trump or tried to help Donald Trump win that election, which caused a lot of people to separate themselves from Trump, which was another thing that the left mainstream media fake news used against Donald Trump, is that even these people that helped him don't even like him anymore. Well, look at how you guys treated them. They just want to be left alone at this point. And so, like I said, Donald Trump should be doing all of his interviews on MAGA type channels. He should not be going on any of the left-leaning channels at all. And if they want to make amends, they need to come out and reach out with the olive branch, not MAGA. We've already tried that, and it didn't work. What's the old saying? Donald Trump could invent a cure for cancer, and people on the left would resist it. I mean, that's where we're at right now. That's the political landscape that we're at right now. We even have people out here saying that Doge is doing something illegal, which they aren't. Elon Musk is basically saying, hey, Donald Trump, look at this issue that I found. And then Donald Trump is making the decision.
But he's also, if I was working at NBC or CBS or one of his networks or ABC who had a big payout recently, I'd be like, okay, we've got to be more fair-minded here. It's simply not good enough. Not good enough. Well, I'm not so sure because it's costing them a lot of money. Money talks,
it's costing them a lot of money,
right?
Else. Right. I mean, Disney and everybody else, but they're never going to do it. Now, when I was in London for the New York Jet Minnesota Viking game in October, I pay close attention to the media in Great Britain, and a lot of them want to interview me. I just did a big thing in Paris. I am stunned by the lack of knowledge that British journalists have about our system in America. They don't understand how it works. They don't know.
Yeah, I agree. Listen, I've had the pleasure and honor of working and living in America for 20 years now. So I have a much greater knowledge, I would say, than 98% of British journalists. And they've been very lazy, particularly, I think, in their treatment of Trump. Just taking a kind of very easy, simplistic narrative that everything he does is awful. And that, of course, the Democrats are better people and a better party. And, of course, they're going to keep winning. And that just hasn't been borne out by events. So
but the British people buy it.
Meek and mild now.
The British people buy it. I mean, you got the BBC lined up to do exactly what the NBC News is doing here. The BBC does over there, right?
Yeah, but I would say that the difference now compared to 2016, for example, or indeed Trump's whole first term, was that I would say the vast majority of people in Britain had a pretty negative view of Trump in his first term, driven largely by the media from America and everyone taking their lead from that. What is different this time is there's no doubt, from my own anecdotal experience, right across Britain, from north to south, east to west, there is a massively better, more positive feeling towards Trump from the public, from the people.
Why?
Not necessarily the media, but because I think they've looked at it. I'll tell you why. Because we have a left-wing socialist government now in this country. Everybody was sick and tired of the Conservatives. They were no good, the Conservative governments, for 15 years. Honestly, a rat bag of very poor, incompetent leaders in the main. And inevitably, they got eventually kicked out of office. But what happened next was not like in 97, when Tony Blair came in and did a lot of pretty good things, actually, and was very, very popular. What happened here was that clearly, very quickly became clear to people that the Labour Party had not had any great plan for improving the country. Their whole stance was going to be the Conservative Party were terrible. They've driven the country into the ground. We're in terrible shape. And by the way, things are going to get worse. And their first actions were to punish financially pensioners and then to punish financially the farmers.
So
and
the
public went,
lefties
hang on, this is ridiculous.
Right. So the lefties are not succeeding in Great Britain So by transferal, Trump looks a little bit better across the pond. Would I have it?
Yeah.
All right.
That's it. And they look at him being very decisive and hitting the ground very hard and running with all these executive orders. And they're like, we'd love a bit of that energy and dynamism over here, please.
All right. Little action, right? In the House of Commons. Let's get some action going on.
So a couple points that he made right there that I'd like to shed some light on, right? The BBC, we just discovered in this last week, has been funded by USAID. That was our tax money going to the BBC, a foreign news outlet, to basically spread propaganda that was anti-Donald Trump, anti-Republican, anti-MAGA to our European neighbors, right? Not only that, it was the New York Times, Politico, and who knows how many other mainstream media outlets that are just basically fact-checking themselves by looking at their neighbor, right? The New York Times looks at the BBC, then the BBC looks over at Politico, and they're like, oh, well, they're running the story. I can run with this story. That's the new age way of fact-checking. It's not actually getting to the source of the news and hearing it out of the horse's mouth. It's, oh, they're saying it, I can say it too, right? Additionally, I find it kind of interesting that Piers Morgan pointed out that the Conservative Party or the right or whatever it is over there in Europe had control for 16 years. And I compare that to the United States, where the Democrats have had control for 12 of the last 16 years. And what that kind of indicates to me is that when one party has too much power for too long, they ultimately lose sight of the people that they're supposed to serve. And, you know, foreign influences, lobbyists, outside sources eventually influence these individuals and they become corrupt. They might not start out corrupt, but they end up corrupt, which is why I'm all for term limits when it comes to the House, the Senate, Congress, everything, right? And I hesitate to say this because I don't think that we should have a Democrat president ever again. I just can't get with anything that the Democrats are doing right now. But I do understand how people having a job for so long, a role for so long, leads them to eventually shake the hand of the person that has some money in that hand and become corrupted. But one thing's for sure, we need these dinosaurs like Maxine Waters and Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, Mitch McConnell, and a bunch of others basically out of our leadership. They have no connection to millennials, Gen X, Gen Z. They don't think like us at all. And it's just time for them to retire and go live out the rest of their days in their mansions, right? Because as I suggested, when these people have these roles for too long, they ultimately enrich themselves and they're all millionaires and they just can't connect with the average everyday American anymore. And so with that, I hope you guys enjoyed this one. If you did, make sure to hit that like button, share this video, subscribe to the channel, all that good stuff. And I'll remind you, you can catch me live every Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time on this channel with the Jar Openers podcast. If you'd like to join the Discord, I have a link down in the description. And other than that, thank you guys for watching to the end. That helps me out a ton. And I'll see you guys in the next video.